No. The single word fell across the moon court, and Emily Carter felt every breath in the great hall disappear. She stood beneath the silver banners of the mating ceremony, her pale hands folded tightly before her ivory dress, while hundreds of wolves watched from the stone terraces. The full moon shone through the high arches, painting the ceremonial floor in a cold, silver light. Emily had imagined this moment since she was a little girl. She had imagined an alpha stepping forward, taking her hand, and telling the pack that she finally belonged somewhere. Instead, Ethan Caldwell stood only a few feet away, his expression calm and certain. "I cannot accept Emily Carter as my mate." A murmur passed through the crowd. Emily's heart seemed to pause. Ethan was the young alpha of Silver Ridge, respected for his confidence and admired by nearly everyone in the territory. For months, Emily had quietly hoped that perhaps he had seen something in her that others had missed. But now he looked at her as though the answer had always been obvious. "I need a Luna who can stand beside me," he continued. "Someone with a stronger wolf. Someone the pack can trust to represent us." The words were polite. Somehow, that made them hurt more. Emily lowered her eyes, refusing to let the tears gathering there become a spectacle. Behind Ethan, Victoria Hayes stood among the honored guests, dressed in deep blue and wearing the confident smile of someone who already knew what would happen next. Several members of the pack looked toward her. Others looked away from Emily entirely. The ceremony elder cleared his throat. "Emily, do you accept the rejection?" For one fragile second, she wanted to ask Ethan why. She wanted to remind him of every time she had helped his family, every winter morning she had carried supplies to the infirmary, every quiet kindness she had offered without expecting anything in return. But she knew the answer would not change. So she lifted her chin. "I accept." Her voice was soft, but it did not break. The elder closed the ceremonial book. Emily turned toward the great doors, ready to leave the place where she had just been told she was not enough. Then, something strange happened. A faint silver glow appeared around her wrist. Emily stopped. She stared down, confused. It lasted only a heartbeat before fading beneath her sleeve. No one seemed to notice. No one except High Elder Marcus, who stood beside the ancient moon altar. His expression changed completely. His eyes widened as he whispered, almost to himself, "The moon did not make a mistake." Emily heard him. She turned slowly. But the elder had already lowered his gaze, hiding whatever he had seen. Outside, the night wind moved through the pine trees. Emily stepped beyond the ceremonial doors without looking back. She did not know it yet, but the girl who had just been rejected before the entire pack had taken her first step toward becoming the woman every alpha would one day wish they had chosen. Emily did not look back. The great doors of the moon court closed behind her, and the sound seemed louder than it should have been. For several seconds, she simply stood beneath the cold night sky, listening to the wind move through the pine trees. The ceremony was over. The moment she had feared for years had finally happened, and somehow the world had not ended. Her heart still ached, but her feet remained steady. She pulled her shawl closer and began walking toward the small cottage at the edge of Silver Ridge territory. Behind her, the pack was already returning to its celebration. Music drifted faintly through the open windows, followed by laughter and the occasional murmur of voices. Emily knew exactly what they were talking about. They were talking about Ethan. They were talking about Victoria. And they were probably talking about her. She had spent most of her life learning how to become invisible when people decided she was not worth noticing. Tonight, she had learned something different. Being invisible was not the same as being worthless. By the time Emily reached the forest path, the lights of the pack settlement had disappeared behind the trees. Moonlight filtered through the branches, turning the ground silver beneath her feet. She stopped beside an old cedar and finally allowed herself to breathe. One tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away. Before another could follow. "You do not get to decide what I am worth," she whispered into the empty forest. The word surprised her. She had never spoken to Ethan that way. She had barely spoken to herself that way. Then a soft sound came from somewhere nearby. Emily turned. Nothing moved. The forest was quiet again. She continued walking, but the strange warmth around her wrist returned. She pushed back her sleeve. The faint silver mark was there again, glowing beneath her skin like moonlight trapped under glass. Emily stared at it, her breath catching. She touched it carefully. The warmth spread through her palm, calm and gentle, almost like the feeling of being remembered. She had never seen anything like it. Her wolf, usually quiet and distant, stirred for the first time in years. Emily froze. A single thought seemed to rise from somewhere deeper than her own mind. Not rejection. Recognition. She looked toward the moon, confused and almost afraid to hope. Then the glow disappeared. By the time she reached her cottage, Emily had convinced herself that exhaustion had made her imagine everything. She opened the door and stepped inside. The little house was exactly as she had left it, warm, simple, and quiet. She set her shawl aside and sat near the window. For the first time that night, she wondered whether leaving Silver Ridge might be the best thing she had ever done. She did not know that across the territory, inside the moon court, High Elder Marcus was still standing beside the ancient altar. He had not joined the celebration. He had not congratulated Ethan. He was staring at the place where Emily had stood, his expression troubled. The moon did not make a mistake, he whispered again. Then he looked toward the northern mountains, where the royal banners of the Alpha King were beginning to appear on the distant road. And suddenly, the old elder understood that Emily's story had only just begun. Morning came quietly to Silver Ridge. Emily woke before sunrise, long before the pack began to stir, with the strange warmth around her wrist still lingering in her memory. For a moment, she wondered if the events of the previous night had been nothing more. Then exhaustion. Then she pushed back her sleeve. The silver mark was gone. Emily stared at her bare skin. No glow. No warmth. Nothing. She almost smiled at herself. Perhaps she had imagined it. Perhaps the moon court had simply been too much for one night. She rose, dressed in a simple cream sweater and dark skirt, and began preparing breakfast. Her cottage was small, but it was the first place in years where she could hear her own thoughts. By 7 in the morning, however, someone knocked on the door. Emily opened it to find Mrs. Harper, an elderly woman from the nearby village, standing with a worried expression. "Emily, could you come with me?" she asked. "My grandson is frightened again." Emily did not hesitate. She followed Mrs. Harper down the familiar path toward the village square, where a young boy sat beside the fountain with his hands over his ears. His wolf had always been unusually sensitive to the emotions around him. This morning, the crowded square had overwhelmed him. Emily knelt several feet away, careful not to frighten him. "You are safe," she said softly. "You do not have to listen to everyone at once. Just listen to me." The boy slowly lowered his hands. Emily reached out her palm, but she did not touch him. She simply breathed slowly, giving him something calm to follow. Within moments, his shoulders relaxed. His breathing became steady. Mrs. Harper watched in amazement. "How did you do that?" Emily shook her head. "I do not know. But she did know one thing." Her hands felt warm again. When she looked down, the silver mark had returned. This time, it was brighter. Emily quickly covered her wrist. Across the square, High Elder Marcus had witnessed everything. He said nothing. Instead, he turned and walked toward the old records house, where generations of pack history were kept. By noon, he had opened a sealed family register that had not been touched in decades. His fingers stopped on a name. Moonblessed Omega. The description beneath it was brief, but unmistakable. A rare bloodline. A quiet wolf. An ability to calm the strongest emotions. And one final warning. Such an Omega must never be chosen by an Alpha through pride or political ambition. She must choose freely when the moon reveals her true bond. Marcus slowly closed the book. Meanwhile, Emily returned home, unaware that her ordinary act of kindness had awakened a secret buried for generations. She stood by her kitchen window and watched dark clouds gather beyond the pine trees. Then she heard something unfamiliar in the distance. Horses. More than a dozen. Emily stepped outside. On the northern road, beneath the afternoon sky, a line of black vehicles moved towards Silver Ridge. At their center flew a silver banner marked with a crowned wolf. Emily's heart skipped. Everyone in the territory knew that symbol. The Alpha King had arrived. By late afternoon, the entire Silver Ridge territory seemed to hold its breath. Emily stood outside her cottage as the royal convoy moved slowly along the northern road, the silver banners catching the fading sunlight. She had seen Alpha ceremonies before, but nothing had prepared her for the quiet authority surrounding the arriving king. The vehicles stopped near the pack hall, and one by one, members of the royal guard stepped out. Then the final door opened. Alpha King Adrian Blackwood emerged. He was tall, composed, and dressed in a dark charcoal coat bearing the silver crest of the Northern Territories. His pale eyes moved across the gathered pack without hurry. Conversations faded. Even the younger alphas straightened instinctively when he passed. Emily remained near the edge of the road, hoping the crowd would hide her. She had no desire to be noticed again. Not after last night. Adrian walked toward the pack hall, listening as the local alpha greeted him with formal words about territory borders, winter supplies, and the condition of the pack. He answered briefly, but his attention seemed elsewhere. Then a small voice broke through the crowd. A young boy had become overwhelmed by the number of people surrounding him. Emily recognized him immediately. It was Mrs. Harper's grandson. He stood near the fountain, breathing too quickly, his eyes searching desperately for a quiet place. Before anyone could react, Emily stepped forward. "Give him some room," she said gently. The crowd shifted. Emily knelt several feet away from the boy and spoke in the same calm voice she had used that morning. "Look at me. You are safe. Take one slow breath." The boy followed her words. One breath. Then another. His shoulders gradually relaxed. Emily smiled. "There you go." She reached out her hand without touching him. The faint silver warmth returned beneath her sleeve. Across the road, Adrian stopped walking. His gaze settled on Emily. For a moment, everything around him seemed distant. His wolf stirred somewhere deep within him, not with aggression, but with sudden recognition. Adrian's expression barely changed, yet the royal advisor beside him noticed. "Your Majesty?" the advisor asked. Adrian did not answer immediately. He watched Emily rise and speak quietly with Mrs. Harper before stepping away from the crowd. There was something unusual about her. Not her appearance. Not her clothing. Something in the way she carried herself after the previous night's humiliation. She had every reason to be bitter, yet she had chosen kindness without hesitation. Adrian finally looked toward High Elder Marcus, who had been watching him from the entrance of the pack hall. The elder's face was unreadable. Adrian understood that look. There was a story here that no one had told him. "Who is she?" Adrian asked. Marcus glanced toward Emily's retreating figure. "Her name is Emily Carter." Adrian looked back toward the cottage path. "And why does she seem familiar?" Marcus remained silent for several seconds. Then he said quietly, "Because some bonds are recognized before they are understood." Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly. Emily disappeared behind the trees, unaware that the most powerful alpha in the Northern Territories had just noticed her for the first time. The next morning, Silver Ridge woke beneath a sky washed pale blue after a night of steady rain. Emily had barely finished breakfast when a messenger arrived at her cottage with a simple request from High Elder Marcus. She almost refused. The last thing she wanted was another reminder of the ceremony, especially with Alpha King Adrian now staying in the pack hall. But something in the messenger's careful expression made her hesitate. "The elder says it concerns your family," he explained. Emily followed him to the old record's house, where Marcus was waiting beside a long wooden table covered with ancient books. "You asked me to come," Emily said. Marcus nodded. "I did. And I owe you an explanation." He opened the oldest book before him. "Last night, you saw a silver light on your wrist." Emily went still. "How did you know?" "Because I saw it too." Marcus turned the book toward her. On the faded page was a drawing of a crescent moon surrounding a small silver mark. Beneath it were words Emily could barely read. "Moon-blessed Omega," she whispered. "Your mother belonged to this bloodline," Marcus said. Emily stared at him. She had spent years believing her mother had simply been an ordinary Omega who lived quietly and asked for very little. "Why did nobody tell me?" "Because your mother wanted you to have a normal life." Marcus paused. "She believed the gift would reveal itself only when you were ready." Emily looked down at her hands. "What gift?" "You calm what others cannot." He told her about the boys she had helped, about the strange warmth that appeared whenever she offered comfort, and about the old belief that certain Omegas carried a rare connection to the moon. Emily listened silently. Then she remembered Ethan standing before her the night before. Someone the pack can trust. A stronger wolf. She almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. "So my wolf was never broken?" Marcus shook his head. "No. It may simply be different." Before Emily could respond, the door opened. Adrian stood there. He had removed his royal coat, leaving a simple dark shirt beneath it. His expression was calm, but his eyes immediately found Emily. For one brief moment, neither spoke. Then Emily felt the familiar warmth around her wrist. Adrian noticed the change in her expression. "You felt it too," he said quietly. Emily looked at Marcus. The elder did not answer for her. She slowly pushed back her sleeve. The silver mark appeared again. Adrian stepped no closer. Instead, he remained where he was, giving her space. "I do not know what this means," Emily said. "Neither do I," Adrian replied. "But I would like to understand it." There was no command in his voice. No demand. Only honesty. Emily looked at him, surprised. For the first time since the ceremony, she did not feel like someone waiting to be judged. Outside, bells began ringing across Silver Ridge. The pack was preparing for the moon blessing that evening. Marcus closed the ancient book. "Tonight," he said, "the moon may reveal what last night only began." Emily's heart quickened. She had walked into the ceremony hoping someone would choose her. Now she was walking toward another ceremony with a completely different question. What if the moon had been waiting for her to choose herself first? By sunset, Silver Ridge had transformed. Lanterns glowed along the stone paths, ribbons of silver and white hung from the ancient trees, and the moon court filled with wolves from neighboring territories. Emily stood at the edge of the gathering, her hands folded calmly in front of her. She could still hear Marcus's words from that afternoon. "Your wolf was never broken." The thought had followed her all day. Across the courtyard, Ethan stood beside Victoria. He noticed Emily almost immediately. His expression changed when he saw how many people were watching her. For the first time, Emily was not standing alone. Several visiting alphas had heard rumors about the moon-blessed Omega and were quietly asking questions. Who was she? Where had she come from? Why had the High Elder personally brought her into the ceremony? Emily noticed the attention and felt uncomfortable. Only yesterday, she had wished everyone would stop looking at her. Now she wished they would look somewhere else. Then Adrian entered the moon court. The conversations faded naturally. He wore a dark formal coat with the silver crest of the Northern Territories, but his presence needed no announcement. His eyes moved across the gathering until they found Emily. He gave the smallest nod. Emily returned it. Nothing more. Yet the simple exchange did not go unnoticed. The moon ceremony began as the sky darkened. One by one, the elders lit the ceremonial lanterns around the ancient altar. Marcus stepped forward and asked everyone to remain silent. "Tonight, we honor the moon and the bonds it reveals," he said. Emily stood beneath the open sky. The full moon rose above the pine trees, brighter than she had ever seen it. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then warmth spread through her wrist. Emily looked down. The silver mark was glowing. A soft gasp moved through the crowd. Marcus raised his eyes. "Do not move," he whispered. Emily remained still. The glow traveled gently across her wrist and stopped at the center of her palm. Then something even stranger happened. Around the moon court, several alphas suddenly became silent. They were looking at Emily. Not with pity. Not with amusement. With recognition. Adrian's expression remained controlled, but his eyes had changed. His wolf had awakened to something it could not ignore. One visiting alpha stepped forward, then stopped himself, as though unsure whether he had the right. Another whispered, "She is the one." Ethan heard the words. His face tightened with disbelief. Victoria looked from Emily to Adrian, suddenly uncertain. Emily did not understand why everyone had changed. She only knew that the warmth inside her felt peaceful. Marcus raised one hand. "The moon has revealed her presence," he announced. But revelation is not the same as permission. The word settled over the gathering. Emily looked at him. Marcus continued, "No alpha will claim her tonight. She will choose freely when she understands what has awakened." Adrian slowly stepped forward. The entire court became silent. Emily expected a declaration. Instead, he stopped several feet away. "Emily," he said, his voice calm enough for everyone to hear, "you do not owe anyone an answer." Her heart shifted at those words. For the first time, the attention of powerful alphas did not feel like a new cage. It felt like a choice. And somewhere behind her, Ethan finally understood what he had lost. The moon ceremony ended, but no one seemed ready to leave. Emily remained beneath the silver lanterns, trying to understand why the same people who had ignored her the night before were now watching her with such interest. The visiting alphas whispered among themselves. Some asked Marcus questions. Others looked toward Adrian, waiting to see what the Alpha King would do. Adrian did nothing. He simply stood at the edge of the court, giving Emily the space he had promised. That quiet choice affected her more than any grand declaration could have. Then Ethan approached. His footsteps stopped several feet away. For a moment, he looked like the confident alpha she had known before the ceremony. But tonight, uncertainty had replaced that confidence. "Emily," he said. She looked at him calmly. "Can we talk?" She almost said no. Instead, she nodded and followed him toward the quieter garden beside the moon court. The lantern light followed them through the trees. Ethan stopped beside a stone bench. "I made a mistake," he said. Emily remained silent. "I thought I knew what our pack needed. I thought Aluna had to be powerful in the way everyone understands." He lowered his eyes. "I was wrong." Emily looked at him for a long moment. There was a time when those words would have meant everything to her. Now they felt strangely distant. "You did not reject my strength, Ethan," she said softly. "You rejected me before you ever took the time to see it." Ethan swallowed and looked away. "I know. You had your chance." Her voice remained gentle. And you made your choice. He wanted to answer, but no words came. Behind them, voices drifted from the moon court. Another visiting alpha had asked Marcus whether Emily was accepting formal introductions. Ethan heard it. So did Emily. She realized something then. The attention around her was changing the way people treated her, but she did not want to become valuable simply because others had discovered something special about her. She wanted to be valued for who she had always been. Ethan looked back at her. What if I asked you to reconsider? Emily shook her head. I would still be the same Emily you rejected. The words were quiet. They carried no anger. That made them impossible to dismiss. Ethan stood there, finally understanding that regret could not reverse a choice already made. Emily returned to the moon court alone. Adrian was waiting near the entrance. He did not ask what Ethan had said. He only noticed the thoughtful expression on her face. Are you all right? He asked. Emily nodded. I think I am. Adrian gave a small smile. Then that is enough. Emily looked toward the gathering. Several alphas were still watching her. She expected to feel nervous, but instead she felt strangely calm. The girl who had once stood in this same place hoping someone would choose her was gone. In her place stood someone who understood that being wanted was not the same as being valued. Adrian offered his hand, not as a command, but as an invitation. Emily looked at it, then at him. She did not take it yet. She simply smiled. And for the first time, Adrian seemed perfectly content to wait. The following morning, Emily returned to the moon court before sunrise. The lanterns had burned low, and a soft mist rested over the stone paths. For the first time, she was not there to be judged. She was there because she had something to decide. High Elder Marcus stood beside the ancient moon altar, while Adrian waited several steps away. No crowd surrounded them. No visiting alphas demanded her attention. There was only the quiet sound of the forest waking beyond the court. Emily looked at the altar where Ethan had rejected her the night before. The memory no longer carried the same weight. She remembered the shame, the whispers, the feeling of being suddenly alone. But she also remembered walking away. She remembered discovering that her worth had never depended on one person's choice. Marcus approached her slowly. The moon has shown us something rare, he said. But the moon does not command your heart. Emily nodded. Then I choose what happens next. Adrian looked at her, his expression calm. What do you choose? Emily turned toward him. She had spent years believing strength meant being chosen by someone powerful. Now she understood that real strength could be much quieter. It could be saying no when everyone expected yes. It could be walking away without hatred. It could be remaining kind after disappointment. I choose a life where I do not have to prove that I deserve to be here, she said. Adrian's eyes softened. Then that is the life you should have. Emily smiled. The silver mark on her wrist began to glow again, brighter than before. This time, the light did not stop at her hand. A gentle silver shimmer spread across the moon altar, and the ancient symbols surrounding it awakened beneath the morning sky. Marcus stepped back in wonder. The bond is responding to her choice, he whispered. Emily looked at Adrian. What does that mean? Marcus smiled. It means the moon waited for you to choose freely. Adrian did not move. He simply held out his hand. Emily looked at it for a long moment. This was not the hand of someone demanding an answer. It was an invitation. A choice. She placed her hand in his. Warmth moved through her, peaceful and steady. Somewhere beyond the trees, the first sunlight appeared over Silver Ridge. By the time the pack gathered later that morning, the story had already spread. The Omega who had been rejected at the ceremony had chosen the Alpha King on her own terms. Ethan stood among the crowd, silent. Victoria remained beside him, unable to hide her surprise. But Emily did not look toward either of them. She stood beside Adrian beneath the silver banners, no longer wondering whether she was enough. Adrian turned toward the gathered wolves. Emily Carter will never be valued because the moon made her special, he said. She will be valued because she has always been worthy. The court fell silent. Emily felt her eyes grow warm, but this time she did not hide her smile. The night she had walked away believing she had lost everything had become the beginning of something she could never have imagined. She had once stood beneath the moon asking to be chosen. Now she stood beneath the same moon knowing she could choose for herself. And that was the moment everyone finally understood, the girl they had rejected had never been waiting to become worthy. They had simply been too blind to see her worth.